What's on your radar, Ryan?
So with Russian forces still pushing their way into Ukraine and the Ukrainian people fighting back intensely, it's impossible to know how or when this ends, and it's hard to know the long-term implications while the storm is still raging. But it's possible that when people look back in 100 years or so, this moment could stand out as the marker between one global era and another. The period after World War II was marked by the Cold War, the conflict between the U.S. and its allies and the Soviet bloc and its allies. The next 30 years saw the rise of globalization, with Russia's economy imploding and feasted on by oligarchs. It also saw the rise of China and the rebound of Russia. Then in 2003, against the urging of most of the countries of the world, the U.S. unleashed chaos in Iraq, reshaping the Middle East. Perhaps the most surprising development in the wake of that invasion has been the eventual reaction of our putative client states, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, who have become emboldened to act unilaterally and in alliance to attack neighboring countries, whether invading Yemen, blockading Qatar, arming militants in Syria, or trying to overthrow the government of Jordan and install a puppet regime. They've done so with an increasingly tight alliance with Israel, which has solidified under the Trump administration with the Abraham Accords, which was billed as a peace deal, but actually did zero about the Palestinian occupation and was instead really a business and military agreement. Now, last week, my colleague Ken Klippenstein published what I think is one of the more interesting stories written on global politics and oil prices in a very long time. And I recommend the whole thing, but the short version of it is this. So as Deputy Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was rising through the royal ranks in 2014, he asked for a meeting with President Obama. The request was a bit unusual, violating all sorts of protocol, and Obama demurred, not wanting to boost MBS's rise. So even though MBS had powerful friends in D.C., many others saw him as reckless and impulsive, not somebody they wanted eventually in charge. MBS kept pushing and kept being put off, and he eventually got so frustrated he announced he was going to meet with Putin and create a bilateral energy deal. Now, for a little context, the foundation for today's global order, built around the petrodollar and the U.S. dominance of the Middle East, was laid on a battleship, the USS Quincy. In a meeting between FDR and the Saudi king, the U.S. promised to support and protect the Saudi royal family and recognize its right to rule however it saw fit. In exchange, the Saudis would sell us oil and sell oil on the global market in dollars. Now, FDR, as we talked about in one of our recent trivia segments, had taken the U.S. off the gold standard. The dollar would now be effectively pegged to the price of oil, and it would be the world's reserve currency. As David Graeber explained in his book, Debt, The First 5,000 Years, in the past, empires extracted tribute from countries that they colonized or conquered. That's not how we do it. Our tribute was and is accepted in the form of dollars paid to us, which we exchange for treasury notes. And because oil is denominated in dollars, everybody has to use dollars, and we get to print the dollars. Now, China and Russia, not so surprisingly, do not like paying tribute to us. And they have made multiple attempts to break the world away from the dollar as the global reserve currency. Those have all failed, and not because of the petrodollar anymore, but more because global investors still think a treasury note is much safer than any other investment in the world. And they look at China's rapid but shaky growth, and they worry the bubble will pop, and whatever they've put in, they'll lose. So that means that we can continue to be the global reserve currency, which is the real driver of American prosperity in a post-fossil fuel world. We don't need the petrodollar anymore. And the Russian attack on Ukraine is the best evidence recently that it really is way beyond time to get off of fossil fuels and on to clean and renewable energy. So Europe's reliance on Russian gas immensely complicates the global reaction. And the war is sending oil prices soaring, which exponentially exacerbates the crisis. MBS's entreaties to Putin on that trip were fruitful, and the two met on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos in 2015. They did cut a deal in September 2016, with Russia joining what became called OPEC+. And MBS did rise to be crown prince, and he now effectively runs the country, though on account of his being a ruthless butcher who killed a Washington Post columnist, Biden won't meet directly with him, recognizing the king as his counterpart instead. He recently met with the king and asked him to help lower oil prices by increasing output, and the king told Biden no. They were going to stick with the OPEC+ commitments. The sanctions hitting Russia now, if coupled with a run on their banks, could be devastating. But clearly, Putin felt that the invasion was in his interest, and one reason for that is the oil price windfall. As Bruce Rydell, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, told Klippenstein, quote, Putin and MBS have much in common, including murdering their critics at home and abroad, intervening in their neighbors by force, and trying to get oil prices as high as possible. Putin will do MBS a great service if he invades Ukraine and sends oil prices through the roof. Now, unless you like paying a few $100s to fill up your tank because of an impulsive decision to launch a military adventure against a sovereign country by a foreign ruler, whether it's MBS or Putin, it's time to ditch the petro system. It's your money that you're paying at the pump that is subsidizing all of this insanity that we're watching unfold. Let's maybe stop doing that. And so, Robbie, what I mean by that we might be witnessing the move to a new era is the fascinating response from Saudi Arabia, China, and the United Arab Emirates to the Russian invasion, which has been largely silence. In the past, you might see silence from China because they often sit on the sidelines and wait to see how things sort out. But in the past, if the United States was condemning something, Saudi and the UAE are condemning it also. UAE abstained on the Security Council vote, wouldn't even vote to condemn this. And so it does feel like there is a geopolitical realignment going on in which dictatorial countries are merging together into a serious bloc in a way that where there used to be a balance between kind of democratic countries and dictatorial countries against the communist bloc. Now Saudi and the UAE are saying, you know what? Maybe we don't want to hear anything more from the United States about what we did to a Washington Post columnist.
Right.
Let's just head over this way. And we don't really know what the implications are of that. The implications are much more significant if the economy still revolves around their fossil fuels.
Right. Well, and all these authoritarian countries increasingly just resemble each other because there's no guiding. The principles of revolutionary Marxist socialism do not guide Russia or any of these countries, even the countries that claim they do. Right. There's actually just dictatorships where the leaders in power try to hold on to power through dictatorial means.
Right.
So they might as well all be on the same side. They don't have principles in clashing with each other. Their principles are just to stay in power and help other people who share tips for doing that with each other.
Yeah, they're very 19th century, early 20th century, just power politics.
Yep.
Zero sum.
Enlightened despotism without the Enlightenment.
Right, yeah.
Unenlightened despotism.
Right, we're headed back there. And so if we want to empower that block of the world, then we can continue insisting on diving deeper into the infrastructure of a fossil fuel economy.
Look, we need to get out of that, obviously, for a lot of reasons, for national security reasons, for the security of the world order. But what is the alternative? It's renewable energy, right?
And what's interesting about renewables is that it's a more global type of supply chain. You've got the rare earth minerals that are in Africa, South America, some in China. Then you have the manufacturing capacity, which is all over the world. The U.S., and then you have the research and development, which is essential to it. And so, the U.S. could become, in the way that we're now the largest exporter of arms, could become the largest exporter of renewable, clean technology, which could reshape the way that diplomacy is done.
Yeah. Well, we've got to try something because this is not sustainable. This is not sustainable.
The survival of the human race is not guaranteed, and we should stop thinking that it is.
Right, and these dictatorships need to choke on their bad, let them choke on their bad policies and also their reliance on, hopefully, increasingly irrelevant
that would be nice.
Kinds of energy sources.
That would be nice. And we'll discuss Biden's Supreme Court nomination with our rising panel next. Stick around for that.